Your Excellency, thank you for being here with us tonight. It's a pleasure having you here.
Katerina, thank you so much for coming this evening. I'm so delighted to have a chance to talk to you.
You've sent a very clear messages to all political parties that they should focus on a very clear campaign and that you expect a fair and democratic electoral process. Having in mind the public narrative we are witnessing now, and the campaign has not already started yet, I think that it's hard to say that they understood your messages. So can we repeat this? Why it's important for them to understand that they should focus on political platforms, not on their opponents?
Well, listen, it's a great question, and frankly, it's one that we could ask of politicians in the United States as well, because as you know, we are also embarking on our own electoral process and looking forward to elections in November. And there will always be those candidates whose rhetoric is perhaps unhelpful. Perhaps it's aggressive, it's overly negative, and that happens everywhere in the world during elections. But what is so critically important is what you touched on, is that the purpose of a campaign and this process is for the voters to understand what the priorities, the programs, the ideas, and the platforms of the politicians are. Because the voter wants to answer the question, what are you going to do for me and my family? How will you make my country stronger, more secure, more economically empowered, and offer opportunities for the future? So negative rhetoric is distracting, and I think it's unhelpful. And it is my hope, and I certainly share this message with politicians that I speak to, that they focus on the things that they plan to do and that they are offering to the voters. And then once the voters have been educated about what those choices are, that they get out and vote for the candidate that reflects their hopes and their values.
What do they bring on the table?
Exactly. That's exactly right. What are you actually offering? It's easy to get caught up in language that doesn't really mean anything. And it's easy just to attack your opponent, but that doesn't accomplish anything either.
This toxic political environment, it's also very, it brings apathy to people, and maybe it's one of the reasons why they feel disappointed or they do not believe in real political changes. But also another key reason is this failure in the rule of law sphere, especially with the changes to the criminal code. The EU delegation was strongly against that. You also announced an analysis. So it's been a while, maybe you have some conclusions of that analysis. And what is your view now? How do you estimate these changes from this perspective when most of the cases for big misuse of public funds failed?
Well, it's a great question, and I think you used the perfect word, apathy, and how citizens respond to what they read about, what they hear the politicians discuss. One of the things that I find very interesting here as we examine both the criminal code and other laws that relate to crime and corruption, and how those are implemented, is that the key is not that the laws are important, but it's how those laws are utilized and how they are implemented by the courts, by the prosecutors, by all involved in the judicial system that is the key test. And my impression is that what many citizens in this country are tired of is the fact that even when the laws do exist, that they're not respected, they are not implemented, they don't actually bring to accountability those who are responsible. And so, yes, there are certain aspects of the code that gave us a great deal of concern, but more importantly is how the law of the land overall is actually put into place so that people understand it, they understand their rights, and they see that those who are breaking laws are being held accountable.
And they're not. And that's why...
And that's a frustration for a lot of people in this
frustration.
country.
Of course. You've mentioned implementation of and how important it is. There is no Macedonian citizens that is not grateful for everything you're doing with the so-called blacklist and trying to help us in the fight against corruption. But how do you see this announcement for a new law for restrictive measures? Because it's a fact that those people who are on this list, they should face sanctions and investigation by the domestic law, with or without specific law.
Yeah.
How do you see this law?
It's a great question, and I appreciate that you have asked this and that we have been asked by a number of other journalists as well. We applauded and continue to applaud the introduction of the law on restrictive measures to the Parliament Committee. It has still not passed. We don't have any idea what a final law might look like, or indeed if it will pass. But we applauded the fact that there are those in the government that saw that this is a way, as other countries have done, to follow up on U.S. sanctions and U.S. designations. But the fact of the matter is that with that law or without it, the opportunity exists for investigators, for prosecutors, to go after those that they know to be guilty or believe to be guilty of crimes, of corruption, of the many, many sorts of behaviors and illegal activities that result in somebody finding themselves on a U.S. sanctions list. And so they don't need the law on restrictive measures to do that. It would be easier in many ways and would allow some of the entities within the government to more quickly and with less bureaucracy to go after some of these individuals, but they don't actually need it. And the evidence is available and it's there. If we can find it from the United States, I can promise you that good investigators here in North Macedonia can also certainly build their cases. And so I hope that the law passes and that it is in a form that is usable in combating corruption. If it's not, I, like the citizens of this country, hope that nonetheless, those within the judiciary and law enforcement enforce the laws and hold people accountable for their criminal activities.
Yes, again, the key issue about implementation.
Implementation and accountability, absolutely.
We talked about the toxic narratives and the public narratives here. Media are playing the key role, maybe, in this area. Hundreds of web portals were rising from nowhere, and they try to use public money, but their mission has nothing to do with real journalism and informing of citizens. How do you see this danger, and how do you see the role of media in this electoral period?
Well, I'm very grateful to established, respected journalists like yourself who want people to be informed and who want people to understand what the issues are and who help them in a very transparent way to understand that. Again, we face many of these same challenges in the United States as well, and there are internet trolls around the world who are there to deceive people, to confuse them, to build a narrative for them that will lead them to support one ideology or another. And that's why it's so critically important for the voters, for the citizens of this country, to do their research, to make sure that they understand that just because something is on the internet doesn't make it true, and to ask hard questions. And to ask hard questions of journalists and to ask hard questions of candidates, as we discussed before, so that they can get to the truth, so that they recognize the truth, and that truth allows them to make a decision that's best for them and their families and their community when they go to vote. This
is a message for the citizens, but what do you think for journalists? How do you see the role of journalists and their professional ethics in this period?
Ethics are very important, and not all journalists display ethics in a way that you and I would agree would be positive. So I call on journalists to, quite frankly, do their jobs. Your job is to inform the citizens, right? It's pretty straightforward. Do your job, do it with integrity, be honest, cover the story, and do it in a responsible way. And don't be part of the the campaign of chaos that we see some journalists engaging in. That's not real journalism.
It's March. Many will say this is a month of women. I don't want to see the position of the women in society through the prism of 1 month only, let alone of some quotas. But still, we have to admit that the position of Macedonian women nowadays, still, we are facing a different challenges. You, as a powerful woman yourself, you've had many challenges in your career. What's your personal message to our women, and how do you see the challenges that our women are facing?
Thank you. I love the question. That's a terrific question. I have told people frequently that my mother doesn't like Mother's Day because she says every day should be Mother's Day. When you're a mother, you should be loved and appreciated 365 days of the year. And when people say March is Women's Month, I say the same thing. Every month should be Women's Month. And I recognize and appreciate that this is a time to take a few moments and recognize the women in all of our lives who work so hard. But it is important for all of us as women and for men to recognize that these roles that women play are critically important to the success of any organization and any country, and that we are important in those roles that we play every single day of the year. And I think it's very important for women to embrace that within themselves and feel that, every day is the 8th of March, and to make sure that they are standing up for themselves and their opportunities and also becoming the strong role models that we need so many more of in the world.
Women in the public life, they are facing even more challenges.
That's
because
right.
They're attacked on many different perspectives.
That's right. And frankly, women in public life are attacked for things, whether it's looks, whether it's the way you express yourself, in ways that men aren't. And so that's a special challenge. And the important thing for us, both as women in the public eye, is to say, I am going to do my job. I am going to do what I am here to do. I am going to love and care for my family, because that's a very important part of my life job as well. And then if people are going to be negative, I'm just not going to pay any attention to them.
Thank you very much for your messages and for this interview.